Hello, and welcome to The Breakdown with Benjamin Nguyen. I'm going to start with a quick story about President Joe Biden's vaccine mandate and get straight into the breakdown for this episode. On Thursday, January 13th, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 to strike down key parts of the vaccine mandate, particularly as it relates to large businesses. The court allowed the CMS vaccination mandate for healthcare workers to go into effect by staying injunctions by preventing its enforcement pending disposition of the government's appeals. However, the court stayed enforcement of the OSHA mandate for businesses with over 100 employees. The argument made essentially was that it was not necessary for all businesses, as not all large corporations have the same risk factors. It is important to note that OSHA can still enforce restrictions for certain business models, such as factories, where working conditions do not allow for adequate social distancing. The U.S. Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh issued the following statement on the Supreme Court ruling on OSHA's emergency temporary standard on vaccination and testing. I am disappointed in the court's decision, which is a major setback to the health and safety of workers across the country. Unvaccinated people are 15 to 20 times more likely to die of COVID-19 than vaccinated people. We urge all employers to require workers to get vaccinated or tested weekly to most effectively fight this deadly virus in the workplace. Employers are responsible for the safety of their workers on the job, and OSHA has comprehensive COVID-19 guidance to help them uphold their obligation. Regardless of the ultimate outcome of these proceedings, OSHA will do everything in its existing authority to hold businesses accountable for protecting workers. Today I'm going to speak about District 5 Supervisor Les Baugh's boardroom behavior during this last year. Supervisor Baugh was elected to the District 5 seat in 2006. As of 2022, that would be 16 years of public service in the position. I want to draw attention to what could be considered consistent manipulation of his constituents in the last year. First, let's start on December 15, 2020. This Facebook post shared by Baugh was regarding the board majority's vote to conduct the following meeting on January 5, 2021 remotely. He chastised the board's decision with a host of reasons why he felt it was too restrictive. Baugh then said that despite the majority vote, he intends to be there in person. On January 4th, Baugh wrote another post, where he challenged the local media's notion that people speaking out in criticism of the board were from a vocal minority. He pointed to Patrick Jones' District 4 win as evidence that a majority of the community felt the same as citizens consistently attending the board meetings. In a post he wrote, "Do you have any idea what it takes to unseat a sitting supervisor?" In the case of Patrick Jones, it takes $115,000 donated by a Connecticut billionaire with a vendetta against Shasta County. The donation amount from Brever Ensemble wasn't heard at the time, but he would later go on to donate an additional $450,000 to recall Shasta for the purpose of recalling Supervisor Leonard Modi. On January 5, 2021, the Board of Supervisors meeting was conducted virtually, with dissenting supervisors Baugh and Jones acting in defiance of the board's majority vote by opening the board chambers to the public. Members of the community came to speak critically of Supervisors Mary Rickard, Leonard Modi, and Joe Commenti for their decision to hold the meetings virtually, which was intended for the safety of both the community and county staff, all while COVID case numbers skyrocketed. Among the speeches given that day, the most memorable was the infamous threatening speech from Timothy Fairfield of Shingletown.
So when the ballot box is gone, there is only the cartridge box. You have made bullets expensive, but luckily for you, ropes are reusable. Thank you.
It was both startling and telling that there was no moderation from Baugh or Jones in response to the clear threats made by Fairfield against their fellow board members. The District 4 and District 5 supervisors seemed to revel in the uproar that their dissent had created. Baugh frequently takes to Facebook to air his grievances about what he considers mistreatment from his fellow board members. Baugh is fairly active in the community and has a considerable online following, largely due to his being a pastor at the Anderson Community Church. On January 13th, Baugh trivialized the implications of censure, which was discussed as a penalty for Jones and Baugh's actions in opening the board on January 5th. He describes the board's actions as, quote, blatant attempts to control fellow supervisors, while essentially doing the same by consistently undermining decisions made by the board majority of democratically elected supervisors. On May 25, 2021, during a vote on a resolution regarding decorum for commenters, Baugh undermines the board majority again by arguing that people will often do the opposite of what you tell them.
If you tell people that they can't approve or applaud somebody, I think they're going to stand up and cheer. Just people tend to do the opposite of what you try to force them into doing.
For the record, the proposed rule relating to applause and cheering would be prohibited only if it stopped the business of the board meeting. No one would be limited in showing approval for a fellow citizen's speech. Recall Shasta leader Alyssa McEwen at this very meeting issued her own statement about decorum.
So briefly want to address that this is not the political climate to begin talking about restricting people's First Amendment rights. Do your due diligence, attend to the supervisors first, and wait until the political climate has been de-escalated. Thank you.
This almost seemed to be a veiled threat about what may happen if the board implements decorum rules. The resolution was passed by a 3-2 vote. Baugh often rides the line between his duties as supervisor and cheerleader for the recall of his fellow board members. As we get closer to the recall election on February 1st, Baugh seems to be spending more time stoking the flames of the recall than serving his district, during a time when further division is the last thing Shasta County needs. District 5 Supervisor Les Baugh has appeared in the Red, White, and Blueprint, a propaganda series parading as a documentary. The documentary is utilized by Recall Shasta and Patrick Jones to drive the recall efforts. Despite past denials by both groups,
you know, I'm sorry, but this fires me up when they start trying to put us all together as one. Recall Shasta,
They do
Red,
on
White, and
purpose.
Blueprint, and the Shasta General Purpose Committee.
Sure.
You're not on Red, White, and Blueprint's board.
No.
Nor on the Shasta General Purpose Committee.
We don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
Red, White, and Blueprint shows every sign of being directly connected to Recall Shasta.
You can sit there all day and say that it's two separate entities. I understand entities more than you probably do because I put together entities every day in my business. So you can have 10 separate entities with 10 separate different ID numbers all controlled by the same people. So that's bullshit.
His explanation of how easily multiple entities can be created to appear separate but are actually controlled by the same people is telling. Mark Kent also recently was on the redistricting committee. Afterwards, he made these allegations.
I was actually on the redistricting committee, and, we spent quite a bit of time going over these maps and these districts and, trying to comply with the law. It's mandated by law that you have this committee that gives input from the public and so forth. And, well, it's really interesting that as soon as those plans got to the supervisors, they got completely thrown out. The two that we had done. You got 3 of the candidates that were going to be running are no longer in the districts that they were living in prior to this map change. So the staff is being directed by somebody, and that only leaves 4 people left. And so, it's either Les, it's either Mary, it's either Joe, or it's Moti. And when you start narrowing things down, it's hard not to start pointing a finger.
It may take a minute to explain the connections being made here. In a previous breakdown, I provided an in-depth report on Reverge Anselmo, a billionaire who currently lives in Connecticut, who once resided in Shasta County over a decade ago, who had numerous legal battles with the Shasta County Board of Resource Management. He is at the heart of this entire movement to recall 3 supervisors.
Would I come back?
Yeah.
That's your question, right?
Yeah.
If you're successful with Patrick Jones, recall 3 supervisors, eliminate the whole resources management division, which has no resources. Yeah, if you did that, I'd go back.
What isn't well known is that despite Les Baugh's seeming willingness to participate in this exercise to recall his colleagues, he wasn't always friendly with this group. In a clip from 2012, Reverge himself explains his frustration.
They all went away except for Shasta County. I went to see Les Baugh. Help me, this is so terrible. And I explained the situation, and he pounded his fist on the table of his office, and he clenched his jaws, and he said, somebody's got to say, enough is enough. How can I help you? And I said, be that man. Right? So he called me back about 24 hours later and said, oh, geez, I just can't be that man. Really, the pressure's kind of overwhelming here, and I guess I'm going to have to go along with the county slapping your wrist. That's the word he used. We're going to slap your wrist. It'll be just a slap on the wrist compared to what the state's going to do to you. But I wish it could have been better.
Following the discovery of this video, the story becomes more clear. Both Les Baugh and Leonard Modi are the only board members serving today who were on the board when Reverge was a resident in Shasta County. Prior to Recall Shasta delivering notices of intent to recall, Red, White, and Blueprint co-founder Carlos Zapata shared this on social media. "I don't think we need to recall Les Baugh." This revelation makes Baugh's involvement in the recall obvious. It suggests that Baugh would have been under threat of recall as well if he didn't play along with Reverge's plan to be the second board vote. It's worth mentioning, as Baugh regularly states that he doesn't act behind the scenes. It couldn't get any more behind the scenes than this. To further drive the point home about Supervisor Baugh's allegiances, on July 12, 2021, there was a rally at the Shasta County Courthouse in support of the Red, White, and Blueprint co-founder Carlos Zapata, who was being charged by the district attorney for his role in the assault on Nathaniel Pickney, a local comedian who is critical of the documentary. On that day, Baugh made this post sharing sentiments from his father, quote, "You can't keep a good man down." His argument in this post is somewhat specious, stating that regardless of a guilty or not guilty verdict for Carlos, that it would cause unrest in our community. I would argue that regardless of that sentiment, that justice is more important than that. His quote about good men disturbed many, as on that day, members of a group the FBI designated as an extremist group, the Proud Boys, were in attendance. At a more recent meeting, on January 4, 2022, the board was set to choose a new chair to run the meetings. By a 3-2 vote, Leonard Modi was voted as chair. Prior to that motion, Patrick Jones made a motion to vote Les Baugh as chair, which failed with a 2-3 vote. Chair Modi then implemented new public comment rules to split the public comment period to the first 45 minutes of the meeting, then proceed with the regular county business on the consent calendar, then back to public comment. Les Baugh proceeds to make a point about Leonard taking a private meeting with legal counsel prior to this board meeting, seeking to expose it as a smoking gun.
This meeting took place in the advance of this meeting, or a question proposed to you from the assumed Chairman Modi?
No, I've
asked that of legal counsel, thank you.
I don't care what you have. I'm just
I've asked that of legal counsel, thank you.
Yeah.
I attended a meeting that was at the request of Mr. Pontus and Mr. Modi.
So yes, prearranged, thank you. So now it's your turn to talk.
Yeah, well, it was not prearranged. It was discussed to determine what was appropriate and what is allowed.
I found that exchange rather strange, because conferring with legal counsel to ensure that actions taken during the board meeting are fair and legal doesn't seem out of line at all for an elected official. Les's statements appeared to be designed to cause unrest, and lead to many community members, including one of Les's parishioners, Venus Bonatelli, to challenge Leonard on the fair and legal board rules set.
Most votes to recall were against Leonard Modi. The majority of the public has spoken and said that they don't respect him, just as he doesn't respect us, just as he doesn't put his eyes on us as we speak, just as he sleeps through the majority of the meetings.
That's a lie.
This is my time, and you already have eaten up much of the 45 minutes. Please be quiet.
I'm just telling you.
I'm telling you, please be quiet.
You know, I want to address this, and I want to address the recall just for a second, too.
That's not on the consent calendar.
Well,
sir.
the recall has everything to do with
It's
your
not on the
ability to
consent
be a
calendar.
chairman.
It's not on the consent
and
calendar.
your ability to make comment on the consent calendar in both cases, because...
Mr. Kent, please contain yourself to the consent calendar.
Well, I'll contain to myself to what I think is relevant to the situation here, which is you're making a bunch of new rules on how the public speaks.
No, I'm using the chair's prerogative to run the meeting as they see fit. And every chair has said that in the past, so.
But you're changing all the rules, you three.
All the chairs have done that. Mr. Clementi, when he was the chair, he changed the rules the way he wanted to.
Okay.
Mr. Baugh, when he's the chair in the past, has done whatever he thinks is appropriate.
The combative nature of these speakers, all of which are recall proponents, were designed to challenge Leonard on whether or not he would enforce the fair and legal rules that were just set. When speakers refused to step down, Leonard had to take a recess to regain order in chambers. During recess, an audience member in attendance reported to the breakdown that Supervisor Les Baugh told recall supporters in attendance to, quote, "keep going." The importance of this cannot be understated. The combative nature of the exchanges with Chair Modi appear to be designed to undermine his authority and additionally serve to show vindictive behavior on Les Baugh's part for not being voted chair. This is further evidenced by something Les Baugh said in regard to Leonard Modi's new rules.
The only reason this is happening is because of the attempt of not trying to hear people up front, which I recommend that we don't try that again, but it's just going to make it worse. But, and I understand you can do whatever you want to, and out of respect, you're going to do what you want to, but I'm just saying, next meeting, there'll be 200 people in here because of what you've done today.
The intent of this statement is virtually a call to action for those to challenge the chair of the board. Directly after that meeting, Les Baugh posts a Facebook post with the heading, "Chairperson Antagonizes Speakers." Attached to this post is an out-of-context edited video produced by the Red, White, and Blue print, further driving home Les's allegiances. Which brings us to January 18th. It was made public that threats had been made to Les Baugh, Mary Rickard, and Leonard Modi. Here is Sheriff Michael Johnson discussing the situation on KRCR News.
Specifically, Supervisors Baugh, Rickard, and Modi have all related to me that they've been receiving threats. And those threats recently have become more frequent, more specific, and more intense. And therefore, sadly, them themselves and their families are not feeling safe.
This resulted in the county taking steps to protect supervisors as well as the public. It was announced that the meeting would take place virtually due to a combination of threats and the recent uptick of COVID cases. Les shared this post on his Facebook page detailing the particular threat he had received. Les then shared a post that he had discovered that his key card was no longer active and he could not enter the board chambers. It is in my opinion that there was precedent set for locking supervisors out of the chambers when Les Baugh and Patrick Jones let members of the public into the boardroom on January 5, 2021. After the board had voted 3-2 to conduct the meeting virtually. It is the belief of many in our community that by going against the board majority vote of 3 democratically elected supervisors, it set in motion the equivalent of a constitutional crisis in Shasta County. As a reminder, both Les Baugh and Patrick Jones were censured for that act. On to the January 18th board meeting. District 4 Supervisor Patrick Jones was understandably unhappy for not having the spectacle of recall supporters at the last meeting prior to the recall election on February 1st. Being that his key card was also deactivated, Patrick had no ability to use the boardroom as he and Les Baugh did on January 5th of last year, or when Patrick opened the boardroom himself when no meeting was being held on August 17th of last year. Patrick arranged for a big screen, complete with speakers and a generator, in order to participate remotely in the board's virtual meeting, while simultaneously holding a pro-recall event outside of board chambers. During the meeting, Les Baugh asks the sheriff if he has the authority to close the board, to further drive the point home he made in his previous Facebook post.
So one more question while I have you there and continuing my own board report. The letter we received from, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will, so you know how I will, but you can handle it, from our CEO. It kind of looks like you made the decision to shut down our chambers, and I didn't think that was the case, but that's kind of what the letter says. So I'd like you to clarify that. Do you, as sheriff, have the authority to shut down board chambers? We are in the city of Reading, and I don't question your authority, but did you, and do you have the authority?
That's a fair enough question. No, I did not. I don't make that determination on whether to shut down the board or really any of the politics that's involved with it. My job is public safety and to ensure that the public is going to be safe, the staff is going to be safe, and you as a board is going to be safe.
Les then makes a motion to put on the agenda the issue of board closures.
And Mr. Chairman, it would be my pleasure at this time to make a motion that we place the subject of the boardroom closure and possible action relative to on our next meeting agenda. So that's my motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
The motion failed by a 3-2 vote, with Supervisors Modi, Rickard, and Commenti stating that board closures should be managed on a case-by-case basis, which suggests that they believe that safety shouldn't be a political issue. Unhappy with the failed motion, Supervisor Les Baugh issues this request.
I appreciate the vote, and the majority does rule, and I respect that. So I'd like to make a public request, and to whomever is listening, to Mr. Pontes, to the sheriff, to APD, or whomever can be arranged. I would like police or sheriff's protection at the site that I receive my broadcast next time, because I certainly would feel much more safe in a room with sheriff's deputies than in a separate location with no law enforcement present. I believe your vote has made us less safe, not more safe. So I would like to request that, and I prefer to have a response back to all the board after the meeting. I don't need it now, but I'd like to have my request considered.
Duly noted.
I want to point out that Les simultaneously stating that he respects the board's decision, but then stating it makes everyone less safe is yet another way of undermining the board's authority. It's clear to anyone paying attention over the last year that Supervisor Les Baugh has become increasingly contentious at the meetings and has a clear and vested interest in recalling Supervisor Modi, as an additional vote would allow Les to control the board in the way he sees fit for his last year in office. In August of last year, Les Baugh announced that he would not seek re-election, which would end his 16-year term as District 5 Supervisor at the end of 2022. If this last year is any indication, his legacy will be remembered as that of misdirection, manipulation, and division. And that's the breakdown.